the last episode I released on ancient Egypt, we saw the rise of the new kingdom. This episode will explore the early pharaohs of this new empire. So, the new kingdom begins at around 1539 BC with the emergence of Dynasty 18, which in my opinion is probably the most interesting dynasty of them all. The first pharaoh of this dynasty was Amos I, whom I covered in my last episode. He came to the throne as a small boy at a time of war when the Hyksos had overrun the north and the Nubians the south. However, by the time his reign had ended, Amos I had not only expelled the Hyksos and reconquered Egypt, but extended its borders to their greatest height yet. This was the beginning of the new kingdom. When Amos died, he was succeeded by his son Amenhotep I, who, like his father before him, was still a small boy when he took the throne. This time, however, Egypt was at peace, and its position in the world was far more stable. Because of his youth, Amenhotep was too young to govern. Therefore, his mother, Amenhotep I, acted as regent, running the kingdom until the young pharaoh came of age. The capital of Egypt at this time was back at Memphis, so the pharaoh ruled from there. When Amenhotep was old enough to rule, we know that he campaigned in Nubia. We also know that for the first time in about 250 years, Egypt began mining turquoise in the Sinai. Amenhotep also commissioned the construction of temples at Karnak in Thebes. These temples were dedicated to the god Amun. Amun had begun as a small but significant local deity. However, his popularity grew over time, and as it did, he absorbed many features associated with other gods. And by the time the new kingdom had begun, he was the most powerful god in the Egyptian religion. The cult of Amun was based at Thebes. Therefore, the growing popularity of this deity meant that Thebes was Egypt's religious centre. One aspect of Amenhotep's reign was that he changed the nature of how pharaohs would construct their tombs from this point on. Previously, pharaohs had constructed large building projects, such as pyramids. Somewhere within or below would be a chamber where the pharaoh was laid to rest, with plenty of valuables to enjoy in the afterlife. However, if the past had proven anything, it was that these large construction projects acted only as massive advertisements to every tomb robber for miles around, and as a result, they had been looted. Amenhotep came up with a solution to prevent this from happening. First, he built a mortuary temple, which would serve as a public memorial so he can be revered after his death. However, his actual resting place would be a secret tomb cut deep into the rock cliffs west of Thebes. Inside would be a series of passages and rooms. Here, the pharaoh's mummy was laid to rest, along with his treasure and anything else he fancied taking with him into the afterlife. This was the beginning of the Valley of the Kings. It was so secret, in fact, that those that worked on these tombs and their families lived in a village cut off from the rest of society. Amenhotep hoped that these measures would allow his tomb to go undisturbed for an eternity. Amenhotep I and his great wife were brother and sister, and were themselves the offspring of a brother and sister marriage. This inbreeding within the royal line has its consequences, and in this case, the royal couple were unable to have children. Because of this, Amenhotep decided to adopt a successor from outside the royal family. He chose one of his most trusted and talented lieutenants to become his heir, Tutmosis I. By Egyptian standards, Tutmosis was of common stock, but he was an experienced military man when he took the throne. It was also the first time in the 18th dynasty that the succession was not handed to a small boy too young to rule. However, to insert himself into the royal line, he needed to marry into it. So he married Amenhotep. She was the mother of the previous pharaoh, Amenhotep, and the sister and great wife of the pharaoh before him, Amos, so by far the most senior female within the royal family. Once on the throne, Tutmosis embarked on a military campaign. After all, he was a military man. He set his sights on the Kerma state in Nubia, and he went straight for the jugular. They sailed up the Nile in order to strike at the Kerma capital itself, and the city was sacked in a devastating attack. From there, he led his army on land and conquered all the way up to the Fourth Cataract. This was the furthest south that the Egyptian border had ever been. Before leaving Nubia, he ordered the construction of a series of fortresses throughout his newly conquered territory. They were to be manned by Egyptian garrisons in order to keep a permanent hold there. The Kerma king had been killed in battle, and the sons of the remaining chieftains were taken back to Egypt to be given an Egyptian education, which is a polite way of saying that they were hostages to deter their fathers from any rebellious activities. Egypt was now an empire, and this meant that its interests were connected to other empires across the Middle East. Empires such as the Hittites, the Mitanni, and the Babylonians. Egypt was part of a community of empires. At this time, the Mitanni were dominating northern Mesopotamia. Egypt had economic interests in the Near East, and the expansion of the Mitanni in recent generations to the north threatened Egypt's economic interests in this region. So, on the 4th year of his reign, Thutmosis embarked on a military expedition to carry out a preemptive strike on the Mitanni. He sailed his forces up the coast of the eastern Mediterranean. He then marched them into Mitanni territory. A battle ensued, and according to the sources, the Egyptians were victorious. But this was not an operation of conquest, but a show of strength in order to demonstrate to the Mesopotamian powers that Egypt was a force to be reckoned with. After defeating the Mitanni, Thutmosis marched his forces back to Egypt. Thutmosis I died around 1481 BC. He was succeeded by his oldest surviving son, Thutmosis II. Thutmosis II, however, was the offspring of a minor wife. Therefore, to strengthen his claim, he married the eldest daughter of Thutmosis I, Hatshepsut, who also happened to be his stepsister. The challenge to his reign was a rebellion in Nubia. Thutmosis II retaliated with a military response and ending the rebellion. However, when Thutmosis II died, his intended heir was his son Thutmosis III. He was just a small boy, so once again Egypt found itself with a pharaoh too young to govern. So, his stepmother Hatshepsut acted as regent, but that's another episode. To conclude this episode, we can see changes during the reigns of these pharaohs that will define the new kingdom. The first, introduced by the pharaohs themselves, was the change from pyramid tombs to the tunnel tombs of the Valley of the Kings. The second, within Egyptian society itself, with the rise of the cult of Amun, which will have a greater impact later on in the 18th dynasty. And third is that Egypt at this time was part of a larger community of other empires that stretched deep into Mesopotamia, and the politics of these powers have become intertwined. Thank you for watching, and if you like my content, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Have a great day.